You can neither run nor hide from a tsunami, and it's quite challenging to predict it. But this is if we're talking about a natural disaster. In this video, you'll find out what super powerful submarine can cause a nuclear tsunami, and can such a submarine become a safe place during a global cataclysm. Throughout history, the power and size of submarines have only increased. In one of the first submarines, built specifically for English King James I over 400 years ago, the ruler himself could hardly fit. But the U-31 submarine, constructed during the First World War, was already designed for 35 people. But the Cold War created real monsters. Nowadays, submarines just can't be small. After all, at least 100 people must work on the ship. Now, the leading countries manufacture fourth-generation submarines, which should have at least 2 nuclear reactors on board. Besides, the submarine should fit several missile and torpedo compartments, a chamber for turbines, a control center, and crew cabins. This is at least 150 meters long. And what about a submarine 2.5 times bigger? Meet the largest submarine, the project of the Russian Pilgrim boat. Its length is 360 meters. Apart from 2 standard ones, an additional nuclear reactor is installed on board the vessel. Together, they're capable of producing 110 megawatts of energy, which is enough to power more than 11,000 homes in New York. And if the Pilgrim is equipped with as many as 3 reactors, there will be enough space on board for hundreds of nuclear torpedoes, right? In fact, the number of missiles on this submarine is 0. This submarine is needed only to transport liquefied natural gas between continents. Such a giant can transport much more gas at a time than a regular tanker. Moreover, the Pilgrim is even capable of breaking through Arctic ice. Only a few ships can do that. At the same time, the Pilgrim in the sea is just like a whale, giant but completely harmless. However, real all-metal sharks can also hide underwater. Shark. This is the name of another Russian submarine, the design of which strongly resembles the main submarine of the U.S. Navy, Ohio. But which one is more powerful and deadlier? Both submarines were launched in 1981 at the height of the Cold War, when the Soviet Union and the United States were ready to use nuclear weapons at any moment. Shark is only slightly larger than Ohio, with a length of 173 meters. However, it's as much as 11 meters wider than its American counterpart. Due to this, the underwater displacement of the Shark increases by as much as 30,000 tons. Each of the 24 ballistic missiles of the American Ohio submarine is capable of completely wiping out a coastal city of 300 square kilometers. But what is the more massive Shark capable of? Actually, its effect is the same. In this case, the size of the Russian submarine is not an advantage, but a disadvantage. They just had to make it so big, because at that time, the Soviet torpedoes with equal power were much larger than American weapons. It turns out that the scale of the submarine doesn't directly affect its destructive power, and not the most gigantic submarines can cause the most significant damage. This Russian submarine is named after the brightest star in the Northern Hemisphere. Is it also the most outstanding in the world of submarines? The length of Arkturus is only 133 meters, but it's good for this ship. After all, together with a new inclined body and a special coating, it becomes invisible to the locators. According to most independent experts, this technology can be considered a breakthrough in global shipbuilding. At a speed that's significant for submarines, Arkturus can silently swim up to the shores of the enemy. Moreover, the patrol of other submarines is nothing for it. After all, the newest equipment can find a trace of enemy submarines by the level of chemicals and radiation in the water and immediately destroy them. Surrogate B drones are capable of attacking enemy ships at a distance of up to 800 nautical miles. It's like the distance from Washington to New Orleans. The crew of Arkturus has the opportunity to play a real battleship, but the stakes in such a game are too high. If the submarine successfully reaches the enemy coast, it will fire 12 nuclear ballistic missiles simultaneously. The total charge of these warheads is 1,500 times greater than the power of the little boy dropped on Hiroshima. Unlike Shark in Ohio, Arkturus doesn't even have to aim at a specific city, because the explosion of atomic weapons will cause water vibrations that will lead to a nuclear tsunami 500 meters high. In a few minutes, such a radioactive wave will wash away all the coastal cities of America. That is, 2 Arkturus submarines, located on each of the hemispheres, can easily drown all the island states and even cause irreparable damage to most mainland regions. If the United States uses the entire nuclear potential of its fleet in response to such aggression, a real nuclear winter will occur on Earth. However, there is one but. At the moment, the Arkturus submarine has not yet been seen. The Russian government has provided only a detailed plan for the new submarine, but nothing is known about its testing yet. Perhaps this is just a fairy tale to intimidate the government of the United States. After all, in the arms race, all methods are good. Nevertheless, the Russian Federation still has one pretty intimidating vessel, the Belgorod submarine. The Belgorod can accommodate 6 Poseidon torpedoes with a nuclear warhead with a capacity of up to 100 megatons. One such torpedo is about 20 meters long, and it's almost like a school bus, an underwater kamikaze bus with a nuclear charge capable of delivering devastating radioactive contamination comparable to a cobalt-clad H-bomb. Such an explosion will completely destroy all life on the territory of about 2,500 square kilometers, and this is like 3 New Yorks. Belgorod is the only one of its kind, and only one such submarine since July of 2022 has been subordinate to the President of the Russian Federation. Maybe he really would like to destroy half the world at once, but after the invasion of Ukraine, we all know that the Russian military desires are clearly at odds with the capabilities. However, submarines can indeed be a serious threat, but can they become a safe place during a global catastrophe? Only in the last 10 years, giant waves have caused tragedies in Japan, Indonesia, Greenland, and other island states. As a result, at least 30,000 people died, and at least another 20,000 went missing. Now, we already have a developed network of sensors that warn of an approaching tsunami, but the population often simply doesn't have time to evacuate on time. But what if such a catastrophe becomes truly global? Leading UNESCO oceanographer Bernardo Aliaga claims that by the year 2030, sea levels will rise significantly. The last time this was observed on Earth was 6,000 years ago. At the poles, melted ice blocks will crash into the ocean, resulting in a series of giant tsunamis. Huge waves will wash away most European coastal cities. And oddly enough, submarines may be our only salvation. Usually, the so-called tsunami bottom begins to form at a depth of about 40 meters. This means that in order to escape from the cataclysm, it's enough just to sink on the submarine below this depth. However, members of the crew of military submarines note that even at such a depth, the consequences of the tsunami are felt quite strongly. Even experienced sailors can easily catch seasickness in such conditions, not to mention unprepared people. What's more, the shock waves from an earthquake can still throw a submarine aground, where it's completely helpless. And even if a collision with land can be avoided, the unnatural position can disable most of the ship's equipment, including batteries. But as an option, we can go even lower. At a depth of about 120 meters, we'll definitely not be pulled into a whirlpool, but such an emergency dive will involve a series of sharp maneuvers and overloads, and this can cause the overheating of the reactor and even its complete incapacitation. This is exactly what happened with the submarine K-27, created as part of the Soviet 645 project. In the nuclear reactors of this Soviet submarine, the coolant was not an ordinary water mixture, but liquid metal. Yes, just like in the second part of the Terminator movie. In practice, such an innovative solution turned out to be, to put it mildly, not the most successful. There were so many accidents with the reactor aboard the ship that the submarine was even nicknamed Nagasaki. So, the tragedy just had to happen sooner or later. On May 24th, 1968, when K-27 was on regular trials in the Barents Sea, a strong storm struck, comparable in power to a tsunami. It caused a failure in the core of a nuclear facility, and the liquid metal simply melted the entire installation. The entire crew of the submarine, 105 people, received a dose of radiation from 600 to 1,000 microroentgen. This is hundreds of times higher than the acceptable norm. 9 sailors died on the spot. The radiation contamination of the submarine after the tragedy was so strong that it was decided to mothball it and then immerse it in the Kara Sea. But even if such a fate can still be avoided, don't get too happy. After all, salvation from a tsunami can become much more complicated if the tsunami is caused by an asteroid fall. Sooner or later, our Earth will collide with an asteroid, and if it exceeds 400 meters in diameter, only a few will be able to escape. Maybe a cataclysm of this magnitude can also be experienced in a submarine. Indeed, if the asteroid doesn't fall in the immediate vicinity of the ship, we can just float away from problems. Oddly enough, the most terrible event for an armored submarine could be an underwater earthquake caused by an asteroid, followed by a landslide. If our ship happens to be too close to the epicenter, severe damage to the hull is unlikely to be avoided. But each submarine has special equipment to help prevent such an outcome. We can be helped by sonars that pick up the slightest vibrations in the water and sound impulses. At the first sign of approaching cataclysm, they'll emit an audio signal to announce the need to move to a calmer zone urgently. However, the data from even such an ultra-sensitive device may be inaccurate. In 2018, a group of researchers from the University of Pennsylvania developed the so-called anti-sonar, a device capable of intercepting and refracting acoustic waves underwater. Thus, if another submarine with such a device appears on our way, the enemies will easily lead us astray or send us to the very epicenter of the earthquake. Then, an underwater landslide will simply cover our boat with soil. Contrary to popular belief, a submarine cannot go to the bottom and wait out a disaster there. Some models can do this, but such a maneuver always carries high risk. After all, if any device fails under a layer of earth near the submarine, it's unlikely to ever be found. Stealth is one of the main advantages of submarines on the battlefield, but in such a situation, it plays against us. A submarine sprinkled with earth is unlikely to be detected even by anti-submarine aircraft. We could go astray even without the intervention of enemy technology, all because of whales. A former sailor, Roy Gilbert, recalled how he, along with other crew members, found himself in a difficult situation during a dive near the Bahamas. At first, everything went well, but several whales surrounded the submarine at some point. Each of them made specific sounds. Apparently, the sailors caught the mating season of the giants, but the songs of the whales made the submarine practically blind. Due to the strong fluctuations in the water, the sonars on board gave an error. It seemed to the devices that the sub was approaching a dangerous seismic zone. But what will happen after the boat is covered with earth, and why is it so scary? The problem is not even that we'll run out of supplies after a while. Soon after the incident, softened soil will enter the shafts of the heat exchangers, leading to a general overheating of the wiring. Yes, we'll be able to wait out the earthquake, but then we'll all die from the fire, like the entire crew of the K-8 submarine. On April 12, 1970, in the Bay of Biscay, the USSR conducted one of the largest tactical military exercises. During a planned ascent from a depth of 150 meters, a fire broke out on the K-8 submarine caused by a short circuit in the electrical circuits of the equipment. The fire began to spread rapidly throughout the boat, reaching, among other things, the reactor compartment. To prevent a nuclear catastrophe, the power plant personnel put out the fire, risking their own lives. The submarine surfaced safely, and the evacuation of the crew began. However, during those days, a storm was raging at the bay, the strength of which reached 8 points. Due to the rough seas and the damage caused to the submarine by fire, it lost its stability. Despite the sailors' attempts to fulfill the order of the military command and save the submarine at any cost, 4 days after the fire, the K-8 submarine sank. At that time, there were 52 of 104 crew members on board, as well as the ship's captain, Vsevolod Bessonov. Currently, K-8, along with 2 nuclear reactors, as well as 4 unused nuclear torpedoes, is at the bottom of the Atlantic Ocean, 500 kilometers from the coast of Spain. But even if we manage to swim away from the landslides and avoid the fire, how long can people stay on the ship? Recently, environmental expert Ian Johnson studied in detail all the previous cases of meteor impacts, and he concluded that such an event often leads to a chain reaction. In the case of a collision, various disasters will rage on our planet for a year and a half. Submarines can stay submerged for several years if they have the necessary food, but people usually give up much faster. The limit for experienced sailors is 180 days, while an untrained person can withstand only 3 months. Moreover, the most impressionable people can even irrevocably go crazy. However, not everyone will have even such a fragile chance to escape. To evacuate the entire population of the US, for example, you need to make a submarine about 500,000 square kilometers, and that's like the whole area of Spain. If we consider more realistic options, some individuals can purchase a private underwater yacht. Migaloo, designed by Motion Code Blue, the submarine reaches a length of 115 meters. There's a swimming pool, cinema, helipad, library, gym, laundry, and several areas for relaxing. And it costs just over $2 billion.